The inverted to inverted roll. This video covers the inverted to inverted pass from the number 6 opposing solo perspective. The inverted to inverted roll is an exciting and dangerous maneuver that ends with a high performance clearing turn and shows off your precision flying skills. This maneuver is the second opposed maneuver in the Blue Angels Solo routine and builds on the previous knife edge pass, utilizing many of the same concepts, so if you have not watched the tutorial for the knife edge pass, I highly recommend you check that out first. Briefing. The maneuver begins with the same beam setup as the knife edge pass, 4 nautical miles away from show center and parallel to center line, flying away from the show box. After the beam setup, both aircraft turn in for center point, following the same profile from the knife edge pass. This maneuver, while fairly simple, is surprisingly challenging to get right, and is also rather dangerous. That means it must be performed precisely, and carefully. As mentioned previously, this maneuver builds on the knife edge pass by adding inverted flight and a 360-degree roll at center point. At 1.2 nautical miles from center point, both aircraft will roll left 180 degrees to inverted flight, crossing center point with the opposing aircraft on their left. At center point, both aircraft will perform synchronized 360-degree left-hand rolls. Then, on number 5's call, we'll perform a 270-degree roll to knife edge, transitioning seamlessly into a 90-degree max performance clearing turn behind the crowd. Following the maneuver, number 6 rejoins with number 5 for the Fortis. Let's dive into the walkthrough. All right, so here we are in our trusty FA-18C Hornet and DCS world, and we're going to be walking through step by step the opposing inverted to inverted roll. Now, just like the knife edge pass, the inverted to inverted roll starts within a beam setup. And to review, a beam setup is at 4 nautical miles, you turn 90 degrees, beam the show, which is perpendicular to the show line. And then once you and 5 are both established, then you'll turn in for center point, aiming to hit 400 knots all the way in, calling your distances and airspeeds all the way for a good hit on center point. Now, one tip that I forgot to give you in my tutorial on the knife edge pass relates to this left MFD down here and the HSI display on it. And that is, it is a good idea to set a course line on your waypoint. And the reason why we do that is in order to develop additional situational awareness of where you are relative to the whole air show, because most of our maneuvers are happening on the show line and almost everything is relative to the show line. Having a reference point for what that show line is really helps a lot, especially for a lateral offset so that you can set up a better turn in. And the reason why that matters is because you want to be as consistent as possible for those turn-ins, right? So here you can see, here's the airfield back here, and we are laterally offset from the airfield, which means that when we turn in for the maneuver, and I'll demonstrate this by pointing at our HSI page, we can just do a pretty comfortable turn and then line up right on the center line and fly that all the way in 400 knots. If we were too close, like if we were flying right on show line, for instance, then we would have to probably come a little bit to the right and then turn in real sharp to get right back on center line, or we'd end up really far inboard and we'd have to correct our heading on the way back in. We don't want to do that for a couple of different reasons. One, because it's going to affect our airspeed quite a bit because we'll lose a lot of speed in a sharp turn, so we won't be hitting that 400 knot mark that we want. And then if we are offset one direction or the other laterally, that's going to affect how far we are from center point. So our distance timings won't be synced up just right if number 5 is flying the show line. So in order to be as consistent as possible and to give him the best reference point, we want to be right on that show line, right on 400 knots. And the easiest way to make sure we're consistent with that is to give ourselves a little extra room in order to make that turn in so we end up right on the show line. So the tip there is to set up your course line and have that set on the show line heading, which at the Kobuleti Airfield here on the Caucasus map is 064 facing crowd left or 244 facing crowd right. But if you put either of them in for the course line, that'll still give you that reference point that you want. All right, so we're going to turn in for our beam setup here at 4 miles mark. We're turning in. We're looking for the airfield. Large sheet blows. Looks like a good beam, so let me know when you're a beam, let me know when you can take your mark. Go ahead and take it, stand by, mark it, and here we're coming in for 4 miles mark. And we are at 4 miles, we're at 375, so we're a little slow, and we are more or less on the show line. So this is pretty good, but we need to pick up some speed in between the 4 and the 3 mile mark so that hopefully by 3 miles we're right on 400, but we're staying on that show line and we're trying to give 5 the best chance for a good hit. At this point, 5's radio call will come in chariots in left inverted, and then we'll respond lebs in left inverted, which means that the inverted hit will be set up on the left, which means we will need to offset from him to the left, which means left of where he's going to be flying. But there's a little tweak to that, which we'll show once we get a little closer to the hit itself. So let's see how we do coming in here. We're picking up speed, picking up speed. Chariots in left inverted, lebs in left inverted. 3 miles mark, 395. So still a little slow, but we're getting closer. And we're coming in for the center point. We're getting set up for that 2 miles mark. All right, so how we doing? 2 miles mark, we're flying 401s. That's pretty good. We're at 250 feet. Pretty good. 2 miles, and we are on 244. So this is a pretty good setup so far. We are 50 feet high. Contract altitude is 200 feet. But you have to remember that 200 feet is where the number 5 pilot wants to set up. We need to set up whatever we need as a vertical offset in order to make sure that the picture looks good from the ground. Typically speaking, that's about 20 to 30 feet. So if the contract altitude is 200 feet, we want to be 220 to 230 feet in order to make that hit look right. Additionally, you'll notice that I am pointed just slightly right of the center point, which is our diamond here. And if we zoom way in, we can see Chariot is right there. And we are pointed just a little to the right of him. But you'll remember that his radio call was left inverted. So why are we pointed to his right? Well, when we roll in for the inverted pass, when we roll inverted, the aircraft will tend to walk left. The heading will adjust left because we are rolling to the left and our lifting surfaces will continue to pull the aircraft in whatever direction relative to them is up. And because we're turning left, it's going to pull us this way. And so I set up just slightly right so that by the time I'm all the way inverted, I am on a parallel heading to number 5 and I have to do less correction in order to fix it. If you do have to correct, try to use the rudder if you can. You're going to need quite a bit of it if you're pretty far off, even a degree or two. But I would highly recommend doing that as opposed to using ailerons and your stick, basically, in order to fix it, because the stick is actually going to be backwards from what you think it should be. So that can get confusing, and it takes a lot of skill to rewire your brain so you know how to do the inverted flight. And you can learn it with practice, but it's a lot easier just to use the rudders because they still work the way that you expect. All right, so we're flying in for center point. I'm going to slow things down here. And at 1.2 nautical miles, we're going to roll in for the inverted. We're going to roll left 180 degrees inverted. And here we go, 1.2, ready, hit it. And you'll notice that we're yugging just like we did in the knife edge pass. But the reason we do it here is because the jet will tend to lose altitude as we roll inverted because we're losing a lot of lift. And so we try to counteract that with a little bit of back stick and a little bit of additional altitude. And then I've leveled the wings. We'll pause here.
One thing I forgot to mention during the roll-in here was that as soon as your wings are level, you're turning smoke on. Usually number 5 will give a call to indicate that, but you've got to know that as soon as you're inverted, smoke comes on immediately.
And we are flying basically parallel And we are flying right on the horizon line here, which is good. We can see number 5 over here, and we can also see that we are flying 260 feet. So we're slightly high, but at this point, I'm not paying attention to numbers anymore. I'm paying attention to what I'm seeing visually, and this is about the sight picture I want to see. I want to see his jet just a little bit below the top of the aircraft attitude indicator here. So if he relative to the top of this guy is above that just slightly, but not so far down as to be above the top of this little thing here, as long as he's somewhere in here, that's about the spot I want to be vertically relative to number 5. Also, keep in mind, I'm not paying attention to heading anymore either. I'm just making sure that I'm flying parallel to whatever he's doing. If he screws up his heading, it's still my job to make sure that the hit looks good. So I don't fly 244 if he's way off and say, well, it's your fault, dude. I got to make it look good based on whatever he's doing. So in this case, this is again the sight picture I want. I want him to be spaced about this far apart. And obviously it's going to change as he gets closer to us, but you'll get a feel for it as you practice it. There's actually quite a bit of forward stick pressure in order to stay level in inverted flight, but all of your lateral movement needs to be done with the rudders. Don't fiddle with the stick for any roll because that'll just throw you off, and it also looks bad from the crowd. All right, so coming in for the hit here. We're going to push. This is important as we approach center point at about the 0.5 nautical mile, half a nautical mile marker. You'll hear from number 5 a little push, or in this case, I think Chariot's call is a little drive. And we're going to push so that we are gaining about 2.5 to 3 degrees nose high as we approach center point. And that's so that when we do the roll, the full 360-degree roll back to inverted, again, we're going to lose altitude when we do that. We want to get our nose high enough so that by the time we roll out wings level inverted again, we are back on the horizon and we haven't lost too much altitude down this way. But as we're doing this, we can't get too tied up with this number 2.5 degrees, because we need to make that hit work. So we're actually flying relative to whatever number 5 is doing. So you'll see he's called the drive, the push, but I haven't raised my nose very much because I'm trying to keep this sight picture here. I'm trying to keep his jet within this line relative to me. And then I just basically fly relative to him. I just walk it up as he comes up. And you'll notice that by the end of this, I'm almost 5 degrees nose high in order to make this work. So I'm a little higher than I should be here, you can see. But as he gets closer, there's a certain point where you just can't avoid it. So there's the roll, and it's an unloaded roll, so you'll want to completely release all forward stick pressure as you roll, and then hard roll to the left. And then again, you're going to be bringing at about this point, you can see where how our attitude is. You're going to want to start bringing in forward stick pressure again to catch it before it passes under the horizon, so you also don't overroll it. It'll help you stabilize your roll. Otherwise, you'll probably overroll, and I actually do that quite a bit. I'm not the best at this, so we'll see how we do here. Not bad, little nose high. That's okay, though. You just want to make it look level and stable from the ground.
And we'll pause again here real briefly and mention that once you begin the 270-degree roll, that is the cue for smoke off. There is no radio call.
And then we're going to roll 270 degrees back to the right and pull hard for a 90-degree clear behind the crowd. These are fun. So a lot of G. We'll speed back up to regular speed. And then we're looking for 334. There we are. Rolling out. And on that rollout, once we reach 334, I actually give a decent amount of forward push in order to neutralize the turn so that we don't keep walking to the right as we roll out. So there's forward, then neutral, then left stick to get us back to wings level. And that's the clear. And then almost immediately once we're wings level, we're going to call clear so that number 5 knows that we're clear, we're safe from the maneuver, everything's fine, we're outside the show box. And then we're going to bring the nose all the way to 10 degrees nose high before we turn to the right and start looking for number 5 for the rejoin for the next maneuver. The reason for that is in the case where we are flying with a diamond, the diamond will be entering the box, and we want to make sure we are clear of their airspace. And we also want to be higher than number 5, however he's clearing, because that makes our rejoin a lot easier. And I will talk about the details of the rejoin in the walkthrough for the Fortis next, but there are a variety of different things that we do during this maneuver in order to kind of set up for that. So we're setting ourselves up for success in that next portion. But this is functionally the end of the inverted to inverted maneuver. At this point, we're thinking about that rejoin, but the maneuver is over and we're setting ourselves up for the Fortis. The maneuver itself is not too complicated. It's difficult and will take a lot of practice to get that inverted flight consistent and get your spacing correct relative to number 5. And it also depends on number 5 being consistent, and he may not always be. But the mechanics of the maneuver are pretty simple and straightforward, which means with practice you can get this to look really good. It's also a lot of fun, and that hard pull behind crowd at the end is a really good kind of reward for the hard work that you're doing in the show box right before that.
All right, let's put everything together with a full calm, full speed run through from one of our recent Kobaletti shows. No show is perfect, but this one will give you a pretty good idea of what it looks like in real
3.5.
time.
And 4 miles mark.
Let me know when you're abeam.
Leb's beam.
Let me know when you're ready to take a mark.
Take it.
Stand by, mark it.
Four miles, mark 400.
Cheers in for the left inverted.
Leb's and left inverted. 3 miles, mark 403. Two miles, mark 400.
Ready, hit it. Smoke on. Contact, looking good. Little drive. Ready, hit it. Trace clear.
Clear.
Stand by, roll. And pull. 3, 3, 4.
Leb.
Stand by, roll. Chariot's clear and clear behind the crowd for the horse. Coming left, hooks coming down. State 9-4.
Leb, state 9-3.
360.
And that's how the Legacy Blue Solos perform the opposing inverted to inverted roll. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel, where you can find full side-by-side show sequences and debriefs. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the flight line.